The morning light streamed through the tall windows of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Tom Richards sat on one of those uncomfortable airport benches, watching his daughter Sophie adjust the purple backpack on her shoulders for the third time. She was 9 years old and hadn't stopped talking since they'd arrived an hour early for their flight to visit her grandmother in Phoenix. "Dad, can we get breakfast after we check in?" Sophie asked, tugging on his sleeve. "Sure thing, sweetie," Tom said, glancing at his watch. Their flight didn't leave for another 2 hours. Plenty of time. That's when Sophie stopped mid-sentence, her attention caught by something across the terminal. A woman stood near the information desk, maybe in her late 20s or early 30s. She wore a cream-colored coat and held a small overnight bag. Her reddish-gold hair caught the morning light, but it was her hands that had captured Sophie's attention. The woman was signing. Her fingers moved with careful, deliberate gestures, trying to communicate with the airport employee behind the desk. The employee, a tired-looking man in his 40s, just shook his head, pointing at his ears and shrugging helplessly. He said something, too fast, too dismissive. Then he turned to help someone else. The woman's shoulders sagged. She stood there, looking lost, her hands falling still at her sides. Tom watched his daughter's face change. Sophie had always been the kind of child who noticed things, who stopped to help earthworms off the sidewalk after rain, who saved her allowance to donate to the animal shelter. "Dad," Sophie whispered, still watching the woman. "She needs help." Tom followed her gaze. "I see her, honey, but I'm sure airport staff will. They're not helping." Sophie's voice was firm. She tried and they didn't understand. Before Tom could respond, Sophie was already standing, already moving toward the woman. Tom's first instinct was to call her back, to remind her about stranger danger, about not bothering people. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the determination in his daughter's walk. Maybe it was remembering how his late wife Jennifer had taught Sophie that kindness wasn't about convenience. He followed, staying close but letting Sophie take the lead. Sophie approached slowly, not wanting to startle the woman. When she was a few feet away, she waved gently to get her attention. The woman turned, surprise registering on her face as she looked down at the small girl with the purple backpack. Sophie smiled and pointed to the woman's hands, then to her own ears, then made a questioning gesture. It was simple, universal. "You can't hear?" The woman's eyes filled with something Tom recognized. Relief. She nodded, then signed something that Tom couldn't understand. Sophie bit her lip, thinking. Then she did something that made Tom's chest tighten with pride and grief all at once. She pulled out her little notebook from her backpack, the one Jennifer had given her for writing down important thoughts, and a pencil. Sophie held them out to the woman and mimed writing. Understanding dawned on the woman's face. She took the notebook with trembling hands and wrote quickly, "I'm Sarah. I need to know which gate for flight 447 to Portland. The board is broken and no one understands me." Sophie read it, then looked up at her father. "Dad, can you check?" Tom was already pulling out his phone. "Flight 447 to Portland, gate C31, boards in 45 minutes. Sophie wrote it down carefully in the notebook. Gate C31. 45 minutes. She drew a little arrow and a clock face showing the time. Sarah read it and her whole face transformed. She signed something, and even though Tom didn't know sign language, he understood. "Thank you. Thank you so much." But Sophie wasn't done. She wrote something else. "Are you traveling alone? Do you need help finding the gate?" Sarah read it and nodded, then wrote, "Yes. Alone. First time flying by myself. I'm scared I'll miss it." Sophie looked up at her father. "Dad, we have time. Can we walk her to her gate?" Tom looked at his daughter, at this young woman who'd been ignored by people too busy to stop, and he thought about all the time someone had stopped for him when Jennifer was sick, when he was the one who was lost. "Of course we can," he said. The three of them walked through the terminal together. Sophie carried the notebook, occasionally writing questions. "Are you visiting someone? Do you like Portland?" Simple things, kind things. Sarah wrote her answers, and Tom read them aloud for Sophie. Sarah was going to Portland to start a new job as a graphic designer. She'd been nervous about traveling alone. She'd practiced what she needed to say, but when the board malfunctioned, panic had set in. No one had time to slow down, to understand. My mom used to say that slowing down is how you see people, Sophie said as they walked. Tom had to look away for a moment. Jennifer had said exactly that, usually when Sophie was rushing through something. At gate C31, Sarah wrote a longer message. You are a very special girl. Don't ever stop being kind. The world needs more people like you. Sophie read it and smiled. Then she wrote back, my mom said kindness is never wasted. She died last year. I think she'd like you. Tom's throat closed up. He hadn't known Sophie remembered Jennifer saying that. Sarah read the note and tears spilled onto her cheeks. She knelt down and pulled Sophie into a hug. When they separated, Sarah pulled a small silver bracelet from her wrist, a simple thing with a little charm shaped like a star, and held it out to Sophie. Sophie shook her head. I can't take that. But Sarah was insistent. She wrote, please. So you remember that you made a difference today. So you remember you're someone's star in a dark moment. Sophie took the bracelet with reverent hands and slipped it onto her wrist. Tom and Sophie stayed until Sarah's section was called for boarding. They waved goodbye, and Sarah signed something that Tom had learned meant I love you in sign language. 3 fingers up, thumb and pinky out. Sophie copied the gesture back, and Sarah smiled through her tears as she walked down the jetway. On the way to their own gate, Sophie was quieter than usual. She kept touching the bracelet on her wrist. You did a really good thing today, Tom said softly. Mom would have stopped, Sophie said. So I did. Tom nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then, your mom would be so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. Dad, do you think we could learn sign language, so if we see someone else who needs help, we can really talk to them? Tom looked at his daughter, this remarkable little person who had somehow inherited all the best parts of her mother, and nodded. I think that's a wonderful idea. They walked hand in hand through the busy airport, 2 people learning that the greatest gifts we give each other aren't always the ones that cost money. Sometimes it's just the gift of being seen, of being heard, even in silence, of someone stopping when everyone else keeps walking by. Sophie touched the star bracelet on her wrist and smiled. She didn't know that in Portland, Sarah would arrive safely, start her new job, and eventually volunteer teaching sign language to elementary school students. She didn't know that she'd changed the course of someone's day, maybe someone's life, but Tom knew, and he'd make sure Sophie understood, as she grew older, that this was the kind of legacy that mattered, the kind Jennifer had left, the kind worth passing on. One small act of kindness in a busy airport, noticed by the only person slowing down enough to see,